Thank
Let
you
me,
everyone for being here. I want to thank you for tuning in on this very cold winter day. My name is Corey Williams, and I'm the program manager for the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History. If you haven't visited our museum, we're located in Springdale, Arkansas, and our mission is to cover the history of the Arkansas Ozarks. This program is part of our monthly series, Not Strictly History, where we cover an array of topics throughout the year. And our next one will actually be on Wednesday, March 19th at 6:30 p.m. And Dr. Michelle Rathgaber with the Arkansas Archaeological Survey will be presenting on the archaeology of native foods. So if you're interested in seeing what our topics are this year, please check out our website. We have some really fun ones planned this year. But today it is my pleasure to introduce Tamela Tenpenny-Lewis. Tamela is the co-founder of Preservation of African American Cemeteries, a nonprofit group to identify, document, and preserve African American cemeteries. Tamela is the recipient of the Association of Gravestone Studies Oakley Certificate of Merit and Outstanding Achievement in Preservation Advocacy Award. And she can also be seen in the AETN documentary Silent Storytellers. This documentary explores the history, culture, and importance of preserving Arkansas cemeteries. Following her lecture, we will have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat and we'll be keeping up with those for afterwards. But if you'll join me in welcoming Tamela.
well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'd like to take the time to thank Corey and the staff of the Shiloh Museum for allowing me to participate in their Black History program and to be able to present to you this evening. Now, for those of you who have not sat in on one of my presentations. I do have notes, but I'm one of those people that I can't stay on point. So I hope that you will learn something from the presentation, that it will be interesting to you, and we will I guess, are you ready to for me to share the screen, Corey?
Yes, yeah,
All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay. And let me know if you're seeing this okay.
I'm seeing it. Yeah.
Okay. Now there's a line across the top. Is that okay? Are you guys seeing that or just me?
I can't see it.
Okay. So all you see is what is on my screen, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I'm going to minimize this. Okay. All right, guys. Well, welcome to my presentation. It is entitled Finding Hidden Histories Through Cemetery Preservation, which you can find these. I'm going to walk you through finding histories through your family, your church, and your community. But let me begin with telling you about our organizations and how we got started and where we are today. There are several members. I'm sure several of our members would be on the yeah, excuse me, on the session this afternoon. But we are members of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. We were founded in 1997, and we are a group of individuals who came together to explore the history and genealogy of African American families within the state of Arkansas. And of course, we all know that the roots run very deep and spread throughout the world. Also, another organization that we have founded is the Preservation of African American Cemeteries. And that organization is dedicated to the preservation of cemeteries through documentation, through histories, recording histories, writing histories, preserving cemeteries with restorations, and then also we have organized different groups, and I'll give you a little more information on that later. But we have two research projects that we began in the late 1990s through the Afro American Historical and Genealogical Society, which is Black Cemeteries Uncovered and African American Funeral Homes, the Final Emancipation. And in those projects, we documented Black cemeteries, listed, made data entries of those that were, deceased, unmarked graves, things of that nature, as well as documenting African American funeral homes. So many of our funeral homes are no longer existing. And to be able to obtain those records and be able to document those death records and create databases is so helpful for genealogy research. In this picture, you see myself with on the left picture with two of my cousins cleaning headstones in Fraternal Cemetery. And on the right, you see me posing with my cousin Carla. And I'm sure you'll hear from her later on this afternoon. And I'd like to introduce you to our Peck Junior Preservation Society. In 2009, we organized a group of young people and it was initially, the group was founded through a chapter in Martin Luther King Elementary School here in Little Rock, Arkansas. And the purpose of this organization, because guys, we all know our destiny. We all are going to die. And what we need to do is pass on all of the information, our history, and educate our young people so that they can carry on, and to make sure that we are remembered when we are gone. So Preservation Junior Society began in 2009, and I am happy to say that we have several members that started then that were third and fourth graders that are now college graduates and still very active with the organization and participated in workshops and things like that. So this is just a couple of pictures of some of our activities over the years. And I'd like to mention that since we have this cold weather, and I know everybody's kind of shut in, get you some popcorn, a glass of wine or something, and be entertained by watching Silent Storytellers. This is a documentary of Arkansas cemeteries, and our junior pack members are featured in it. And it's a great go to AETN. It's an AETN documentary. So make sure you go and watch it on one of these cold nights. And it's very interesting, and there's a lot to learn about cemeteries all over the state of Arkansas. Okay, so now we begin. Now that the introductions are over, African American cemeteries, with the passage of time, have been largely neglected. They've been overgrown, lost, and forgotten, and where oral history and our caretakers have provided impressive details on the location and size, the number of individuals buried, the location of the family plots, along with the names and history of those interred. Many of those old historians, because that is what they were historians, by knowing the history of those individuals buried and those individuals within the communities, they now lie underneath a blanket of weeds, poisonous vines of oak, ivy, broken headstones, debris, literally carrying with them our unrecorded history to their graves. So that's why cemetery preservation is so vitally important. And while the communities in which many of our individuals are buried have become a shell of the population that they once were, the plight of our lost and forgotten cemeteries can be contributed to abandonment, encroachment, vandalism, farming, urban renewal, and development. And I'm sure all of you have cemeteries that you're trying to locate, research, document, that are either no longer existing, you're having trouble finding them. And I asked the question, what is it what is it do you see when you look at this solitary, weather-worn stone marker standing deep amidst nature's foliated debris? What comes to mind? Is it the history of that area? Is it the lack of history of that area? Is it the fact that there's nothing else around but farmland? What do you think of, and how many of you have actually been in the situation of these type cemeteries? We're going to talk about factors that cause cemeteries to become lost, abandoned, or forgotten. And I would like to mention that one of the main focuses for the preservation of African American cemeteries and our goal of preserving cemeteries is because so many of our cemeteries have been lost, they have been abandoned, or they've been forgotten or destroyed. So we're going to talk about, and everything that I talked to you about tonight regarding preservation of cemeteries is going to provide you with methods in order for you to be able to research, document, and preserve. So keep that in mind as we go through different areas of information. But one of the things that is very important about cemeteries is knowing their size and location. Small family plots are located on private farmland. They're often created in the corners of farm fields. They're in wooded areas. They're on hilltops. They're along the edge of creeks and rivers. You have small rural farms that where the ownership changes from time to time, and a lot of these locations become lost due to where they are. Ownership. Ownership is extremely important when researching because you have to determine who owned the cemetery. You know, if the family members have moved or died away or died or moved away, then there's often no one that's interested in taking care of the cemetery. What you see here in this photograph appears to be an abandoned cemetery, possibly, but who's the current landowner? You know, does the current landowner have any type of personal connection to the cemetery? Do they care about it? Is it just on their property and an eyesore? So for people to have an interest, of maintaining cemeteries, it has to be personal for you. It really does. Now, there's also the passage of time, which is another um, reason why cemeteries become lost or abandoned. With the passage of time, you have exposure to the elements, and they take a great toll on the cemeteries. As you can see in this photograph, we have a cemetery. You see a headstone, but you also see a lot of dumping, where people just take mattresses and trash and with no respect to those who have been buried or those cemetery properties. You know, it is physically and financially challenging for a lot of families to, take care of cemeteries or make sure that they are preserved. But for a lot of people, if they don't have the time or the resources, they just ignore it. And this is what leads to a dumping slot. And of course, economics play a large factor into why many of our cemeteries have become lost, abandoned, or forgotten. You have farmers, you have, issues with farmers when, if the cemeteries are located on their property, and there is no personal attachment to that cemetery. What they will do is plow over them. You will find that they will plow over the cemeteries. They will push the headstones off into a ditch. They will, if they have cattle or farm animals that are on the grounds, they will just, permanently erase the landscape, the cemetery from the landscape. And we also have that same issue with developers. Developers do the same thing. So these are different means that contribute to cemeteries becoming lost, abandoned, or forgotten. So one of the things that we need to do first is determine what type of cemeteries there are. Many of us are witness to large cemeteries that are under perpetual care, and they are well kept and well maintained. Well, there are so many other cemeteries that are not. The type of cemeteries that we deal with, you have cemeteries that are considered church graveyards. So they are located adjacent to a church. You have family and community cemeteries that are maintained by personal families, private or public, and the community. You may have churches assigned to those uh, as well, to those community cemeteries. Then we have rural African American cemeteries, of which you've seen pictures of how they look on farmlands. Abandoned cemeteries are the ones that are overgrown. You think they're there, you've heard they're there, but you don't see them because of all of the growth and years of no one maintaining them. And then we have our desecrated cemeteries. So these cemeteries generally have been abandoned, and you have people that will just have no respect for the deceased or the dead. They will break headstones, use them, shoot them, shoot holes in them. Young children will ride their three-wheelers through these cemeteries, kicking over stones, breaking stones. And then you also have cemeteries that have been desecrated where they have markers in them that are bronze. And, for a period of time, a lot of people were stealing bronze markers or copper, selling copper to resell them for money, melting them down and selling them. Then you have what we call roadside cemeteries. When you're going down a two-lane highway and you're on a rural highway, you'll look to one side, look to the other, and you may see, oh, cemetery over there, cemetery on both my left and right side. Wonder how did that happen? Well, generally, what happens is that the cemetery was there first, and then the highway department has come through and put put a road through the cemetery. Now, the question remains, what happened to the graves that were underneath the road? I'll let you figure that out. And then we have cemeteries that have been developed over. Case in point, this is Kroger shopping center that is on Roosevelt in Little Rock. And right behind Kroger, directly behind Kroger, is Fraternal Cemetery. When Fraternal Cemetery was established, it was 15 acres in size. It is currently 7.5 acres. So you ask yourself, what happened to all the graves that were there? And why is this Kroger shopping center there? Because it was built over the cemetery as well as Horace Mann High School, which is to the left of this photograph. Were the bodies relocated? That's another question. All right, paupers' graves and potter's fields. For those of you that research death certificates, and this is a copy of a death certificate. What's interesting about this is at the very top, you see pauper. This is a death certificate of an infant that passed away. Generally, when you have paupers' graves or potter's fields, these are locations of burials where individuals did not have the means to bury. So they're sometimes buried in a mass grave or individual graves. So paupers graves and potter fields you generally will find the information on a death certificate if one is provided. And then, of course, we have our prison cemeteries. And I will make reference to this a little bit later, but we do have prison cemeteries where when you're in search of loved ones and you just can't seem to find them, always check records for that. All right, one of the most important things before you begin doing any type of research in preserving your cemetery, you need to learn the laws. It's important to become familiar with the local, state, and federal laws. They are different in different states. They are clearly spelled out. Many states have cemetery boards or they have different organizations that preserve cemeteries. So you can, just Google them, look them up, and understand the laws, particularly in your local county and within your state. Getting organized. One of the most important things to do when you are planning on preserving a cemetery is being organized when you do it. If you're not organized, you're going to be all over the place, like I might be doing this presentation, but it's very important to be organized. And one of the things that I must say, you must surround yourself with people who have the same interests, with people who care about the project as much as you do, and for people who are willing to stick through it and get the job done. Because it is not a simple task. Cemetery preservation, as we have learned over the last 2 decades, 2 to 3 decades, that it is not easy. It is very challenging. You can't wear your emotions on your sleeves. You have to deal with legislation. You have to deal with communities. You have to deal with people that don't want information shared. There's a lot of things that go into it. So if you prepare yourself initially, you'll be ready to take on those challenges. So let's get organized. First, you want to locate your cemetery and your cemetery owner. You want to obtain written permission from the owner. If the owner cannot be found, you need to petition the quorum court for permission to conduct work at the cemeteries. Once you have found the current owner, you will need to obtain written permission to gain access to and perform all the activities that are connected to the cemetery. You need to develop your plan of action and organize your group and set your goals. It's very important to know what it is you want to do before you set out to do it. Research is a major factor. Research the area, research the history of the area, become familiar with the site. The reason why it's so important to locate your cemetery owner is because many people have a personal reason for wanting to preserve a cemetery, mainly because their family members, their ancestors, their grandparents are buried there. Well, you may think that the cemetery is abandoned, and you may start going in on your own to start working in it and, cutting grass and doing things like that. But, because it appears to have been abandoned, but that's not necessarily so. So locate your the owner. When you form a group of volunteers, there are cemetery associations out there that you can learn from, or you can just join forces with an established historical society or a genealogy group or some other groups that are also researching and documenting in that area. And that's one of the things you do. That's why I say learn the area, do your research, because you don't want to start working on something that's already been done, or spending time researching, and the research is already there. Some of the cemetery has been documented already. So, create your goals, develop your plan, and you want to conserve and preserve is your method. There's a lot of documentation out on how to, document and research cemeteries. One of the things I would say to begin with in the beginning that will help you is getting survey forms. And these forms can be available online, through ancestry.com, through 23andMe. I mean, not 23andMe, but Family Search. We have the Arkansas Archaeological Survey in Arkansas. We have Preserve Arkansas. There are a lot of groups out there that can help you with forms and documentation information. But this is just a list of some of the things that when you step into that cemetery, you want to know what you're looking for. So there are surveys on general cemetery survey forms, individual markers, because you have markers of all types. The condition of the survey. What condition was that cemetery when you stepped foot in it? Were most of the stones intact? Were they broken? Were they laying over? Were they, was there a lot of unmarked graves, which you could tell by depressions, but no markers? You know, uh, does anybody know what probing or witching is? Carl and I will talk to you about that later. We'll bring it up later about probing and witching in cemeteries. But there's vegetation surveys. So you want to know when, you guys are aware a lot of times when people don't leave a headstone, but they'll plant a tree or some type of plant or bush or something to indicate that that grave is there. So you want to, and also there's natural growth in cemeteries, and then there's also different flowers and things like that that are native to that cemetery, so that we lose over time because of improper clearing. Then you have the marker conservation form and then unmarked burial survey. And then, like I said, there's a lot of unmarked graves in these cemeteries. Okay, what we're going to do is to determine the background information. So what you do, what we're going to talk about is the date and establishing the origin of the name of the cemetery, organizing your group, define your goals, and I guess I pretty much have kind of covered that already. So then now we'll discuss resources for locating abandoned or lost cemeteries. And I'm going to be running through this stuff really fast because I got a whole lot of slides and a lot of stuff to cover. And so Corey, you're going to have to keep up with my time because I could talk all night. But anyway,
Okay, we'll do.
okay. What I want to do, guys, is provide you with resources. Now, mind you, our topic is about finding hidden histories in our cemeteries. And by preserving the history, you preserve the cemetery. You have the restoration side of preserving, but you have the historical side of preserving. I'm gonna give you some samples and examples of different ways to do that. We'll start with the slave narratives. So many of you are familiar with the Federal Writers Project, which was done between 1936 and 1938. And these are the states where the slave narratives were collected. As you can see, Arkansas had a large number of narratives, 677. When you're doing research on a community or the citizens within a community, these are the slave narratives are very interesting because they give you time, location of that individual, how life was for them during that period of time. I want to share with you, I have three narratives, three different individuals that I quickly want to share with you. But this is Maddie Traylor Ross, and she was interviewed in 1943. And the reason I brought up Maddie is because she was I was contacted by someone that was asking about a cemetery, which is Scott Burgee cemetery, and it was so I did some research to look up Miss Bishop. And the interesting thing about this is these are excerpts from um her narrative, and she talks about Old Man Burgee, which the cemetery is named after. He was the first man to be buried in this particular cemetery. And she talks about she tells you where she was down there in Memphis Edition, and she talks about Professor Dykes, whose place that she was on. And she mentions that she was born after the surrender. So, she's guessing that she's about 74 years old now. And she goes on to talk about who her mistress was and, how they worked the farm. But it gives you person, it gives you the name of the slave master, it gives you location, it gives you an idea of when she thought she was born because she didn't know exactly. And this is Lotbergy Cemetery, which is in Jefferson County. And when she talked about Tatum, old man Tatum, as you can see, there's a headstone there that is Tatum. So we're pulling a slave narrative together to bring it forward to a modern day cemetery and those individuals being buried there. This is the slave narrative of Dr. Bluford Gaines. Reverend D.B. Gaines was a graduate from Philander Smith College in 1891. He worked as the assistant principal of the Little Rock Union High School and pastor of Mount Pleasant Baptist Church before attending medical school at Meharry. He graduated in 1896. He became the author of Racial Possibilities, but this is where you tie in not just a historical narrative of a person, but you tie them into the places that they were and what they became and what they did. He's a graduate of Philander Smith. This is a picture of his headstone. And this is the narrative that was provided at the time that he was interviewed. He was 75 years old, and he goes on to say that he was born in 1863, that he's now 75. He was named for his father's master, Dr. Bluford Gaines. And he's saying, my name is Dr. Bluford Gaines. He said, of course, I am a doctor, but my name is Doctor. And he talks about when his family moved to Arkansas in 1882, how they settled in Moorton. And then he came to Little Rock in 1885. He talks about the white families that he worked for when he went to college. So there's a lot of things that are very important that are in these narratives. He even talked about the exodus of Black people. So, very interesting. Now, this is a narrative of Sally Bishop Crane, who was interviewed. And, Miss Crane is a native of, she was born in Hempstead County in 1860. And she says, my mother's name was Mandy Bishop and my father's name was Jerry. I don't know who my grandfolks were. They were all Virginia folks. So when you study the migration of our people coming from Virginia, some came down as freedmen, some came as indentured servants, some came as with their slave masters. They came from Virginia, down through the Carolinas and Alabama and Arkansas, through Texas. So you follow the migration pattern, and you can do this with some of these narratives. But she mentions that they came from Virginia. She tells us who her master was, Harmon Bishop. And when they divided the property, she fell to Miss Evelyn Bishop. But if you can see here, it gives you, she says that, when you go back to the census records, because you're researching these individuals. And that was one of the things, too, that was so important for our PAC Junior kids, for us to teach them how to research these individuals that they found in the cemeteries, so that they could write a history of them. Now, she talks about having a daughter. The daughter was Earlene Bishop. She was 13, listed as the age of 13 in the 1860 census. And here you also have the slave. This is the slave owner of Harmon Bishop. This is the slave schedule. Now, African Americans were not listed, or Blacks were not listed in the census records with actual names until 1870. Prior to that, you were listed, 1850, 1860, you were listed with, by the slave, under the slave owner, not by name, but the number of slaves that they owned and their ages. So when you start pulling these narratives or your histories together, you can determine, okay, well, my great-great-grandfather in 1860 was on the Bishop Plantation. He was 45. My great-grandmother was 40. My dad was 25. My mother was 23. So you can, you're pulling these names and dates together. So it's giving you a sense of perhaps that is your family. Not necessarily so, but could be. Another method, so those were the examples of the slave narratives. Now let's talk about maps and maps and surveys, because if you can't find the name of your cemetery, or if it's been lost or forgotten, you can look at the United States Geological Survey maps and the local atlases. And I know all of you guys remember growing up with a real map and the atlases and how they showed you locations. There were, cemeteries on these old maps were denoted with a cross and a name. And you can, if you don't have any of these, you can request an index from the United States Geological Survey in order to get information from your local area, or the Atlas and the Rand McNally, which is what you're looking at. This is cemetery, Kuykendall. It's been called Kuykendall, Curtentall, Cottontail, all different kind of names by local people, depending on what period you lived around the cemetery in the area. But as you can see, and it may be a little hard to see where I had circled the square and the cross on the map that shows Kuykendall Cemetery. This is also another cemetery where you can find it on the map. Now, if you look at the two black squares, the one that is circled is Black Campbell, and the smaller black square is White Campbell. These are two cemeteries that are in Hensley, Arkansas, that were on the Campbell property. And the White family, their cemetery was up on the hill, and the Black cemetery was in the lower lying area near the creek. But when they were both designated as White Campbell and Black Campbell, again on the map. This is what we have here is a map of a cemetery. Now, as you can see, it is, if you look at under the Arkansas Department of Corrections Wrightsville unit, come down to the square that's on the left, and you see Cephas Cemetery. And then behind it, you see Perfect Peace Cemetery. So these are the type of maps that you can get from the land surveyor. So that's another source of maps. Warranty deeds are very important. When you're going through your family history, through your family records and documents, look for warranty deeds. And these warranty deeds will provide critical information on the burials, on the location of the burials. And one of the things about the deeds, let's see, they tell you who the owner of the deeds are. And they also provide you like the names of the deed holders, the total number of graves that have been purchased, the lot numbers, the section numbers, the volume and page numbers of the deeds, the date of transactions, and I think I have another picture of actual one that I'll come to in just a minute. But another source of finding information in locations of cemeteries, particularly those that are overgrown or hard to find, is Find a Grave. You can go to Find a Grave, and if anyone has entered that information, you can find the name of the individual, when they were born, possibly a picture of their cemetery, their headstone, or the death certificate. So Find a Grave is a great resource. Here is another map. As you see, right in dead center, it shows Haven of Rest Cemetery. This is a picture of my great grandmother, Miss Betty Tenpenny. And one of the reason why I have this picture here is because it's very important to understand that landscapes change over time. You may have visited a cemetery 50 years ago, and there were mausoleums on that cemetery. There were a lot of headstones, and then you may have moved out of town. Now you're back in town, and you've moved back home, and you're deciding that you do want to take care of your cemetery and your ancestors that are buried there, but you're having trouble finding everything because a lot of the monuments are gone. The large monuments are no longer there. And now this one I was talking about the deeds of finding the deeds, the warranty deeds. This is one in particular from Haven of Rest, and where you saw the headstone of Betty Tenpenny. She is buried in this section. So on this deed, it shows you the burial location. It shows the records indicate who the lot owners are. I inherited these plots from my great aunt, and at the time of purchase in 1948, she purchased 12 lots. And it shows here, if you look at the square to the right, you see the numbers. There's two rows of headstone, two rows of graves. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 goes behind it. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1 through 6 is closest to the road of the cemetery, but it shows you also the space number, who's in that space, what funeral home buried them, and when they were buried. So those things are very important if you're starting from scratch and all you have is a written obituary at home where you do know when your ancestor passed away, but you don't know how to find or locate their headstone or the cemetery in itself. And these are just some pictures of the burial when and Capitola Tenpenny Winston is the great aunt that I inherited the lots from, and that area as it looked back then. And then here is a recent picture of what it looks like now, the area. So as you can see, based on the information that I've provided, there in 2, you see Betty Tenpenny's headstone, and she was buried in 46. And then you see that my aunt Lamo, as we called her, is next to her. But this shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and how they're located in the cemetery. Another source is death certificates. Now, my Aunt Betty, my great-great-grandmother Betty, had a brother named Kite Spain. She was a Spain. That was her maiden name. As you can see from this death certificate, that he is buried in Haven of Rest Cemetery. P.K. Miller was the funeral home that buried him. And, he died at the age of 76. It tells you who his parents were, where they were born. And then it also shows the informant. And we'll talk about informants a little bit later. But I don't have any idea where he's buried in that cemetery. Even though I have the death certificate showing he's in Haven of Rest, I don't know his actual location. Useful resources to find unknown burial sites and unmarked graves. In many of our rural cemeteries, we do have a large problem of unmarked graves. And some of these documents that I'm going to go over with you will help you give you an idea of what records to look for to help you find them in those unmarked graves. We're going to talk about family and personal records, oral histories, church and community, death certificates, funeral home, and vital records. Now, all of you grew up with a family Bible in the house. I know you did. Where is that family Bible today is the question. These are sources where you can get family, and keep in mind that a lot of our ancestors, they didn't have ancestry.com, they didn't have 23andMe, they didn't have Family Search. But what they did have was the knowledge of family members, particularly through oral history. And that grandmother would get that Bible out and she would write down who was born, when they were born, who was married, and all those pages, believe it or not, those were the early days of genealogy because those Bibles had genealogy pages within them. So when you go back through family records, and guys, it's so important. Don't throw anything away. When somebody in the family dies and you go through their stuff and you look at it and you say, oh, this is just junk. No, it's not junk. It is they look at them as historical records. You look at family letters. Those letters will place you at a time and date of things that, this is before computers. So family members would write to each other and they would say what was going on in the family, who was sick, who came to visit, things of that nature. And they would also stamps. If you're a stamp collector, they would have stamps on them. They would have dates and times. When you do interviews with your family members, oral interviews, it's important to talk to them about locations, places, and times and things that they did. Photographs, vital photographs. You can do a complete family history with photographs, with establishing timelines, vital records, marriage records, wills, deeds, mortgages, city or county directories, cemetery records, grave records, newspaper articles. Newspaper articles give you a wealth of information. I found one the other day for my cousins that was showing when their mother, when my great aunt, Miss Capitola, hosted a reception for their parents being married. And it talks about who was there and what was provided and things, and gives the address of the home and things like that. So you have voter records, you have public school records, you have yearbooks. Yearbooks are essential. You have archive records, land grants, state census, military records, mortality schedules, land records, pension records, passenger lists, and obituaries. These are sources that you can go to confirm family oral history. Now, these are just some pictures of some of the things that I talked about, the family Bible. And this is a picture of my great aunt, Miss Capitola Tenpenny, in the center, but you got newspaper articles and things of that nature that will support you. One person that is really, really, really important, and so many of them are gone now, was the caretaker, because that caretaker knew every edge of that cemetery. He knew who was buried there. He knew why they died, if a diseases came through and wiped out a whole family like whooping cough or tuberculosis. The caretaker could take you to that area and show you those family members and where they were buried. So if you have church records, or anybody in your family that is the son of a caretaker or the grandson of a caretaker, go to them and ask them, do they have records of or notes, or even just scribble notes from the individuals that were caretakers in the past. And this is just a picture of that from a family Bible that I mentioned earlier, where you see these dates. And look at this. You have the first birth that's put in there was 1907, 1909, 1911. So these are, and you have some other items, on the bottom. So these are, you had the birth, the marriages, you have the deaths. So if you can't find records, because death records in the state of Arkansas uh, weren't established until 1914, until 1914, I believe. So anyone that died prior to 1914, you may not have the opportunity to get a death record of. But they don't stop looking, because sometimes there were delayed records that were filed by members of the family. When you're also looking for graves in the cemeteries, look through the family's old when you're looking through old papers and things like that. This is from Dubison Burial Association. When I was my parents would pay insurance. And you guys remember that old insurance man that used to come around every month with that big leather book, and the members of your parents would pay that 50 cent or 75 cent a month to cover insurance policies. And as you can see, it was $1.50 for my dad. He's the head of the household, so his policy costs more. But these are things that you want to look for when you start cleaning out somebody's records and papers and things like this. And this is just kind of like a schedule of the record of when that gentleman would come along. And and guys, you also know that once those burial policies, a lot of more often than not, when a person was deceased and you went to cash them in, the value of them was only $500. So now we're talking about researching obituaries, funeral home records, and tombstone inscriptions as vital records, because vital records are very important. In obituaries recounts the main events in the person's life. It begins with their name, the name of their parents, their birthplace, the schools they attended, their church affiliations, their vacations, their hobbies, their acknowledgments, who their survivors are. When you look at the funeral home records, they tell you about death certificates. Of the death certificates, they give you the data of the who the doctor might have been that treated that person, who was responsible for filing the death certificate. You have tombstone inscriptions. That some tombstone inscriptions are very elaborate. They give you a history of an individual. They will show a tree, a family tree, uh, and talk about personality traits. I know a lot of you have seen the tombstones that say "gone fishing." Putting people's favorite hobbies on them. One of the things that I want to talk about very briefly is when you're researching, this particular obituary has a picture of a gentleman on it, but his name was Shirley. Long ago, uh, a lot of names were gender names. You had, females named Shirl. I mean, named that went under Eddie Mae. Women named after their fathers. So you had, but you had names like Shirley for a man, Eddie for a woman. So keep those things in mind when you are looking at obituaries, particularly ones without a picture on them. And then you have nicknames. We all grew up with nicknames. Many of us have attended funerals where we never knew the real name of an individual because they were referred to by their nickname their entire life. This gentleman, his name is Elzora Mayweather, and his nickname was Goose. But one of the things too is the spelling of names. If you look closely in the obituary, you may have spent all your time looking for a Mayweather, but he may have been listed as a Merriweather. As you can see, both names are listed. He's listed as Goose Mayweather, but he leaves to cherish his memory, his wife, Estella Merriweather. So, and his sons, Charles and Robert Merriweather. So, it could have been a military thing where they changed his name uh with the military, and he just went by that because of those documents. Or it could be that he uh you know the different surnames, like even with my mother's family, you have Scoggins and Scroggins within the same family. So name changes or spellings are very important. Another thing that you find on obituaries, if you're in a cemetery and you're looking for Sister Mary Turner Overton, where do you find her? Which husband is she going to be buried next to? So you can see that her obituary shows her as Mary Turner Overton, but she was married several times. She was first married to Jacob Curtis, and had 5 children by him. So I'm sure those children last names are Curtis, as you will see when it shows who her offsprings are. And you have she later married Ed Williams and had three children with him. Now, both of these gentlemen have preceded her in death. Then she moved to Little Rock, so they may be buried elsewhere. And she married Mr. Overton, who was her last husband. So it's possible that she could be buried next to Mr. Overton in the cemetery. So these are all things that you need to look at. And also, when you're trying to piece together that family tree or that family history, it tells you who her sons were at the time of her death. It may you also know that she's had like 8, 9, 10 kids, but living at the time of her death, she had three sons. And then it goes on to say how many daughters. So those are ways of keeping up with that. And for my cousins that's on my thread, if y'all are watching this presentation, quit dinging because y'all are distracting me. But anyway, so all right, so we have this one. Now the reason why I have this obituary is because of the content that's written on it. You know, we have a young man that passed away, and it gives you, you know, and cemeteries are important because they also give you the name of the church. If you're doing a database and you want to do a history of all the churches in your community, and especially those churches that have cemeteries connected to them, you will find the name of the church, you know, who the pastor was at the time, and who that individual is as being buried. But the thing that I liked about this obituary is that the someone had wrote on it and passed it to a note, I guess, to say, come up to the house and get the chicken for the family. So, you know, that was in the day when people actually really cooked for repasses. And, you know, the food was enjoyable and you loved it and enjoyed it. And I can share a story with you real quick. I will share a story with you real quick. On one of my sorority sisters, her mother passed. And so we were one of the things that of course, you know, I'm not making light of her passing, you know, because we loved her and that type of thing, but my point is how we focus on certain things. And when they had set the time, you know, for the repast, the whole week all I was talking about, because they, you know, they were from Osceola. So that whole week I was talking about, oh, we going to Osceola. It's going the funerals in the country, and I know these country folks are gonna be cooking. So I'm looking forward to the repast because I want to eat, right? So anyway, now I'm one of those people, I don't cook, but I know what's store. So we get to the funeral, and you know we're at the repast and I'm in the line and I'm just like have been anticipating this all week. I get in the line and I'm looking at the food and I'm like, okay, no, that ain't no homemade cake. No, that ain't no homemade fried chicken. No. And I was extremely disappointed because we have come to a time now where repasts are not homemade anymore. The food is not homemade. But anyway, I just had to say that. But anyway, this is when I talked about not throwing out notes, every piece of paper, please read it before you throw it away. And even though it may not make any sense to you, it may make sense to you later. Because with this note, you see where they're talking about, you know, somebody mentioned that the first time somebody went roller skating at Gillum Park. Well, Gillum Park is in Little Rock, and the park, the skating ring, all of that is gone now. So, you know, this gives you an indication when you're doing community histories of some of those sites that were there that are no longer there. And then this is just another obituary of two sisters that passed at the same time, and their funerals were done at the same time. I'm going to move really quick because I know that I'm going to be running over my time. And then, but the important thing is, like, you see where she was born. One of the sisters was born in 1889. So a lot of this stuff gives you date and time. Fraternal stones and orders of the Eastern Star things like that. We'll cover in a little bit, but I wanted to show you this obituary because, and you can tell how they change over time. This was in 1956. It does show the cemetery that buried her. It shows the funeral home. It shows that there were graveside services at by her Order of the Eastern Star chapter. So it lets you know that she was a member of the Order of the Eastern Stars. Um, I think that when we do obituaries, obituaries now are 12 pages and 600 photographs and they kind of get away from the purpose of the meaning of celebrating the life of the individual that passed away. But I also think it's important if you're going to put pictures in an obituary, let those pictures reflect the life of the deceased. Here you have the a page one of the pages from my grandmother's obituary where it shows a picture of her and her husband, my grandfather, when they were young, and then an older picture of them, and then it shows their children, the five sons and four daughters, and you list their names, and then below the bottom picture is a picture of my grandmother at the age of 12 with her mother and two of her pictures. So you're providing a family dynamic or history in these obituaries as opposed to just putting a lot of pictures of people in there that may or may not be pictured with the deceased. And then her mother was married twice. So the gentlemen are her brothers, the ones that are with their wives from her mother's first marriage. And then we have the Peyton family roots of Mr. Albert Peyton of Hot Springs, and it shows his family, and he is the young man that is standing next to the mother, to the right of the mother, that's holding the baby. Now, death records, what do they reveal? Death date, birthplace, all of those things. This is I have to tell you a quick story of this is my grandfather. And when you do oral histories or you go to your grandparents or great grandparents and ask them questions about their family, about their upbringing and how many children they have and how many wives they had and all this kind of thing. They might not tell you everything. But when I came across this picture, I showed it to my grandfather, and I said, "Ooh, Daddy, you was good looking back then." And I say Daddy, but he's my grandfather, my father's father. That's John Wesley Tenpenny. And so I said, "Ooh, Daddy, you was good looking back in the day." I said, "You must have been a booger." He said, "I was a booger then, and I'm a booger now." So, and I think my grandmother threw a shoe and hit him upside the head after he said that. But anyway, when you ask them for questions, ask them things, you got to stay with it because they'll tell you so many things. This is a death certificate of a lady named Gertrude Tenpenny. And when I found this death certificate, I went to, well, actually, I'd gone to the Bureau of Vital Records and was trying to find whatever I could. And I had given them certain names to look for, but one of my classmates worked there, and she said, "Well, Tam," she said, they haven't, I didn't find any of the people that you were looking for, but I found a Gertrude Tenpenny." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I don't know of a Gertrude. I haven't come across one in my research, but I'll take it, thanks." So as I'm looking at it, I see Gertrude Tenpenny and I see the address. 2906 Short Main. And then I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I said, "I know that address. That's where my Aunt Lamo or Aunt Capitola lived." And then I look at the name of the spouse. And it says she's female, colored, married. Spouse is John Tenpenny. And I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. John Tenpenny. I know Grandpa lived on that street." But anyway, so I went and asked him about it and got a little bit more information. But one of the things is when you get death records, make sure you ask for the original record because it will contain more information than a certified copy. So this is the actual death certificate. And as you can see, there is a lot more information. It gives her cause of death. She was 27 when she passed. She's buried at Lonely Cemetery, but she was his wife that he did not tell us about. So, one of the other things that's important about informants, as you can see, this is a photograph. I think it might be a order out of order, but it is of a Booker T. Morton who died in the state penitentiary, and he was a convict. But unfortunately, there was no one there that knew him or knew his family, so they were not able to provide any information for him. But one thing that I want you to note down at the very bottom where it says place of burial, uh, cremation or removal, you see the letters AMC. What happened with him or his body, because he had no family, no contact, his body was donated to science. So he was sent to the American Medical Center for to be used. And then these are like just different things that are significant to different um uh obituaries, and I mean death certificates. And this is another individual that died in the city jail. He's buried in Fraternal Cemetery. It shows down there, and it shows the date and time he was born. He passed away. This is just another example of a certificate of death. One of the things I want to point out on this, when you're looking for your people in the military, this clearly states that he was a retired merchant marine. So he was a marine. He's buried at National Cemetery, and as you read it, it gives you that information. One of the things too, when you go into funeral homes and you start asking, requesting information or researching, you have here it was on this is the information that was written on the back of his death certificate. It said that he was a retired merchant marine and he was a veteran of World War II. So always look for extra notes. Don't look at just what's in front of you, but research and look for any type of notes you could find. People dying in transit. Miss Toll Free. Now, guys, you remember how you used to hear about people say, my dad had a brother. He left and went to California, but we never heard anything else from him. We don't know what became of him or anything like that. Sometimes people did die in transit. This is a death certificate of Miss Annie Tollfree, and Miss Tollfree died on the train. She was on the Missouri Pacific train and passed away. So, her daughter had to go through getting her body and getting her body shipped. And so these are just different things to look for, different modes and different types of information that are placed on these death certificates. This is a individual that died in New York and at Mount Sinai Hospital, but her body was shipped to Arkansas, to Little Rock, and Dubison Funeral Home took care of the body. And then, and it shows her survivors. It shows that she was buried in Haven of Rest Cemetery. And it shows right here, you see what lot she was in, the section she was buried in. And this is a picture, me going to look for that grave. She was buried in the Carver section. I didn't actually locate her grave, but that gives you information when you're trying to document and preserve your cemetery and the people that are in it. Also, this is another photograph of a transit permit. So these are permits that provide information. This individual died in Chicago, died from tuberculosis. Her body was shipped to Little Rock. So there's all types of documents that you want to look for to provide you. Not, it's not just a death certificate or a newspaper article. There's so many other things that are out there. And this is, we had different diseases, tuberculosis, typhoid fever. Sometimes when you know that a person died, but you don't know exactly when, but you know they died from typhoid fever, and there was an epidemic during that time, just like in the 20s, there was a tuberculosis epidemic, then you can go, and that gives you a sense of time to try to research those when you're researching and looking for death certificates. And you see PTB as the cause of death for Mr. Williamson, and that is, pulmonary tuberculosis is what he died from, which was also tuberculosis was also referred to as, oh, I can't think of it right now, but it may come to me later. But anyway, we talk about the unmarked, the unknown of your ancestor or family member. And this is just to show you that, again, they can be convicts and die in prison. Okay, how much time do I have, Corey? Because I'm going to have to start moving real
Well,
fast.
If we want time for questions, like maybe 10 more minutes, is that
Okay.
okay? Okay.
All right. Okay. So, all right, guys. So let's see. Tombstone inscriptions as vital records. There may not be a death certificate, as I mentioned. There was no records of deaths prior to 1914 in Arkansas. So you may find a headstone. Now, what's interesting about this headstone? What do they tell you, or what do they not tell you? This is New Geeton. When I took this picture, it was about probably 30 years ago, but it says New Geeton, age 75 years, died 30 years ago. So if I took it 30 years ago, and he was 75 when he died, but he died 30 years ago, let's add 60 years on to that. And how old is New? So it's very important. The more vital information you put on the headstone, helps you with your research and identifying them. This is a headstone of Archibald Gardner. The interesting thing about Archibald, you see that this is a large headstone, and there's a lot written on it. And the reason there's so much written on it is because Archie had 11 wives, and 7 of those wives are buried with him. So this gives you a close-up of when he died and the wives that are buried with him. So I don't know if they down there fighting, but they with him. But anyway, this is what we call, when we look at tombstones, this is a tombstone that is considered a double marker. So you have the McKinneys, and both of them deceased, and it shows actually when they were married. So you have double markers, triple markers, single markers. One of the things about the death records here, this just give you a full collection of one individual from of the Honorable Donahue, a legislator, and there's his announcement from the newspaper, his death certificate, his headstone. So when you pull in a history together, you can do this for every individual that is buried in that cemetery. We talk about fraternal orders. I'm going to run through it very, very, very quick, because in many of our cemeteries, there are fraternal order headstones. You have the uh, Mosaic Templars, and what you see here are the founders of the Mosaic Templars fraternal order. And when fraternal orders were found, and let me find my notes so I can be a lot quicker with this. When fraternal orders, cemeteries throughout the South are dotted with monuments from fraternal order organizations. And you have the Mosaic Templars, the Supreme Royal Circle of Friends, etc. But while many of these graves are in rural areas and marked by while many graves in rural areas are marked by fieldstones or handmade markers, these were established because of burial associations. And that's how fraternal orders got their start. They established with, we have so many people that didn't have any way of being buried or having the insurance to be covered by burials. So the fraternal orders were established for that reason, and did tremendous made contributed tremendous benefits to all of us. These headstones all had different markings, and I'm gonna run through them very, very quickly. The Mosaic Templars, you would see that symbol on the headstone, and the letters and the numbers all have a meaning. The 3 V's are believed to represent Veni, Vidi, Vici, and the 3 you show where they have the crossing staffs of the and where the Mosaic Templars was the story of the Exodus and connected with Moses. We have the Royal Circle of Friends, where that was founded in 1909 with Richard Williams and Helena. And these are the type of headstones that you'll see for the Royal Circle of Friends. The headstone on the left is a Royal Circle of Friends, and that is my great-great-grandfather, John Tenpenny, faithful member of the Sunshine Circle number 101 He died March 28th, 1922. So look at all this vital information on this headstone. It shows the fraternal order he was a member of, when he died, and what the chamber was. And you're going to get names, like chambers, lodges. The one on the right is also a great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, and that is Rance Gonder. We have the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, which was a benevolent society. And you will see it if you guys have seen the three rings, and they stand for they have the FLT in the rings, which stand for friendship, love, and truth. So these are ways of identifying those markers in the cemeteries. So friendship, love, and truth is the three rings, and then you have the Knights of Pythias with the FCB, friendship, charity, benevolence in theirs, and then the triangle with the words love, purity, and fidelity are the Sons of Temperance. So we have this is one headstone where the gentleman was a member of everybody recognizes the Masonic Lodge headstone. And this is another picture of the three rings of my great-great-grandfather, Rance Gonder, and a picture of him and his wife with her headstone. And it says Catherine, wife of Rance Gonder. And that's a picture of me with John Tenpenny's headstone. You have Moses Dixon, who was the Knights of Liberty, the International Order of 12 Knights and Daughters of Tabor. And this is what these headstones look like. They have the three, you notice that there are 3 3s and 3 7s. The 7s on top is the males, and the 3s on top are the females, and that gives you the definition of what they refer to. And then, of course, they provided life insurance, burial insurance, provided health care for members. They were primarily in the Delta. And this is another, these are some local headstones from Riceville and Sweet Home. And then we have Kuykendall Cemetery, where you have some of those markers in. Now, these are all over the South. Anywhere from Riceville to Nashville, Arkansas, to Wynne, Arkansas, to Auburn, Alabama. These fraternal orders existed. Okay, and then and on this death certificate, this is a death certificate of Emily Lynch. Many of those fraternal orders had their own cemeteries. You had the Oddfellow cemeteries, and then like this one below is a cemetery in Augusta, Arkansas, and it's called Masonic Cemetery. Now, one of the things that our organization is doing right now, we're in the middle of a research project, and it's called Cemeteries Reveal the History of Early Black Communities. His cemetery is a history of the people, a perpetual record of yesterday. What we are doing is collecting information so that we can write the history of these 6 Black communities. I'm going to show you, because if you Google College Station, you may get a little information. If you Google Higgins, you may just get the location of where it is on the map. So our goal is to write and record and document the history of these 6 Black communities and tie all of these families and histories together. This is when you start pulling community histories together, I'm going through it very quickly. You'll have to look at it and read at it because I'm going fast. But this is Walter Wiley Jones of Pine Bluff, an ex-slave who became one of the first wealthy African Americans in the South. He was a significant part of the history of Jefferson County. He owned stables, had a horse track, the streetcars. One of the things when you're collecting information, and when we go back to our history, this is who am I? This gentleman was born in Hart County, Georgia in 1977. He migrated from Mississippi and settled in Riceville. He was a farmer and educator. He had a school named after him. He had a granddaughter that became the mayor. And the thing about this, guys, is that we have so much history within our communities. You don't have to go outside your community to learn. You need to learn who the people are you grew up around. Who were those older people? They were principals and school teachers and pastors. Who were they? How do we identify them? So the question was, who am I? This is John Calhoun Cook. and the school that was named after him was J.C. Cook. This is a picture of his obituary when he passed away, his and his death certificate, all providing you with information. This slide is providing you information from one of our members who, through Project 365, was researching her family and discovered that she had grandparents and great grandparents that were tied to the Riceville community. So, she gives, through the newspaper and the death certificate, she was able to locate the graves and things of that nature. That was her great grandmother. This is her great grandfather. A picture, and we are so fortunate to be able to have pictures to place these people with who they are, where they were, and when they were born, because a lot of these people were born in the 1800s. This is another community individual. And guys, we had people who owned acres and acres. They own businesses. They own, uh, you know, uh, a lot of things. And this is the obituary of Miss Corrine Cunningham, who was a plantation owner. She hired people to sharecrop on her property. And there's just so much history within our communities. The history of Virginia Baptist Church, got to run through in a second because oral history is very, very important. This tombstone gives you these two ladies, they were told in their oral history or heard from their family that their great grandfather was a minister, and he was the first minister of Virginia Baptist Church. And that's all they knew. They were living in Detroit. They came to Arkansas and wanted to find his grave. The cemetery that he was buried in was completely overgrown. You couldn't even see it from the streets. We were able to locate his grave. They were able to form a cemetery association so that they could keep the clean cemetery, start recording his history. Unfortunately, these two sisters passed in a car accident, but they left a legacy and a history of being able to locate. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because while we're researching Virginia Baptist Church, as you see on that picture, it says Reverend Alfred Durham, born at Durham, North Carolina, March 9th, 1809, died March 30th, 1908, ordained minister in 1863. So with him being an ordained minister, we come now to the written history of Virginia Baptist Church. The church was established in 1868, and it says down on the paragraph, realizing the need for a leader, they elected Father Durham as their first pastor. He did those things that were right in the sight of the Lord. In 1891, following Father Durham, they came with Reverend Betts. So what that does is it identifies even though the spelling is different, they spelled it Durron, but it shows it was Durham. And that connects him to BB Chapel's, to Virginia's history. Okay, a Rolling Stone gathers no moss. Because this is preserving African American cemeteries, this is just real quickly headstone preservation. When you see a headstone that looks like there is no hope for it or all is lost, it is not. With the proper techniques of preserving and cleaning headstones, and you need to do it the right way and know what materials to lose, you can have a headstone to come and look this. If you see this picture, those are some headstones from a cemetery in Louisville that I cleaned, and you can see that they were dark, hard to read, and then after stone cleaning, they were legible. This is one on the left is chalked so that you can see that there is, because before you couldn't even tell the letters were there. So it's chalked so that you can see that, and then you can actually read it after the cleaning. So don't be dismayed when you find them and you think that there's nothing. Now, this is one where I'm showing you in the different stages where you can see where it's being cleaned. And then that's the final result. So this is also this is down in Alabama, Auburn, Alabama. You can see all the lichen and mold that's on this headstone. And that was this picture of my first cleaning, and then a picture of the headstone with my second cleaning. So and then buried treasures. I got 4 minutes and I'm done. Buried treasures, the stories of Bold Pilgrim Cemetery, Morton, Arkansas, the final payoff. I want to show you guys that your hard work does pay off. That when you begin your research and you're looking at a cemetery that's completely overgrown and you have no information in front of you and you are thinking, oh, this is going to be a huge task. It's going to take me the rest of my life, of which it will, because once you start, it doesn't end. You will be going to your grave still doing cemetery preservation. But this is a cemetery in Morton by the Bold Pilgrim Cemetery Association that this is what their cemetery looked like when they started. And this is what, after they started doing their preservation area efforts, getting grants to help, uh, learning the history of the cemetery. And then when they did the documentation of it, they were able to do a big fold out flyer giving you the history of the community and the cemetery and the people tied to it. They had it surveyed, they had maps, they had, shown the location of the graves. They produced a book and a video. They gave you the history of the Bold Pilgrims, preserving the legacy. So it can be done and you can do it. And then of course there's some of you that may have the question about, okay, now that we've done all this work, how can we get the cemetery registered? And we could talk about this a whole nother presentation on how to get your cemetery registered on the National Register, or just getting it registered with the state of Arkansas. So, like when you do the application, this is the information that they're going to require from you on the application: the name of the cemetery, the address, the owner, the nominator, and the different things. But we can talk about that on another day. And then I'd like to just make, since we are celebrating Black History Month, I would like to celebrate some notables that are resting in peace in Haven of Rest. And all of this goes back to a statement by Benjamin Franklin. He says, show me your cemeteries and I will tell you what kind of people you have. So if you have a cemetery that is abandoned, you have no idea who these people are, it's overgrown. There is a history of those people that is not recorded. Their lives and the contributions that they made to their communities is lost. It is up to you to make sure that these histories are brought out. We have Lena Lowe Jordan, who Miss Jordan was a nurse who organized the crippled children, a home for the crippled children. She later founded the Lena Lowe Jordan Hospital, which was on 16th and Chester Street. That building is no longer there, and it was available to African American patients regardless of their ability to pay. And she developed a program of staffing that brought rural girls to Little Rock to serve and work at the hospital. You have, of course, Scipio Africanus Jones, who was a graduate of Philander Smith College, and he was a prominent individual of the Republican Party of Arkansas. He never attended law school, but he was able to pass the bar and practice. So, of course, he was the attorney for the African American men in the Elaine race riots of 1919. And we have Dr. Stanley Ish, who was one of 4 African Americans to break the color barrier in the Placer County Medical Society in 1953. He graduated from Harvard in 1909. So we have a wealth of information that has, that we need to pass on. You have Amelia Bradford Ives, a graduate of Fisk University, who led a fundraising drive in 1923 to build a sanatorium for African Americans who suffered from tuberculosis, and that it was located in Alexander, Arkansas. So this is a tribute to many of our important ancestors of the past. We have the Little Rock Nine. We have Daisy Gadsden Bates. You see her headstone. She's buried in Haven of Rest. We all know the story. And then let me end with this last story, The Class That Never Was. And we all are aware of the closing of the schools in 1958 and 59, the fall bus shutting down the schools in the state of Arkansas, and what was considered a lost year. Many of our parents, grandparents, were not able to go to school that year, so they had to go to, some left the state, many, and even though it is a painful part of our history of desegregation and all of that, there is one good thing that came out of it, because my father was attending Horace Mann when the schools closed. So a lot of those students were sent to J.C. Cook, and I mentioned Mr. Cook earlier in the presentation. And there at J.C. Cook, he met this young lady, Evelyn Scoggins Tenpenny. So that's my dad on the left, Samuel James Tenpenny. And he met Evelyn because of the schools being closed and them having to go somewhere else. So the reason it was a spotlight or a good thing that came out of it is because they produced me. Aha, right? All right. Thank you, Mom and Dad. So anyway, I like to end my presentation. I have always ended my presentation with a poem by Langston Hughes. And the reason I use this poem is because it's a reflection of what we do with cemetery preservation, uh, and the fact that it will outlive us, and it's important to train everybody, train our young people to continue the legacy of our family, and protecting our burial sites and our community histories. So the poem by Langston Hughes is, and you see this, and I'll come back to it. So I would like for you to take this with you because we all will be there. The poem is, I'm gonna walk to the graveyard behind my friend, Miss Cora Lee. I'm gonna walk to the graveyard behind my dear friend, Cora Lee. Because once I'm gone, somebody's gonna have to walk behind me. So thank you guys for being with me this evening. And that headstone, I found a headstone of a Coralie. I do not know who she is or where she was or from, but this is a tribute to her as well. So thank you for joining.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so much, Tamela.
you're welcome. You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Corey.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending. Best wishes to you all. Good health, good wealth. This is a new year. Be happy. That's the most important thing. Take care of your health and be happy and preserve those cemeteries.
All right.
Thank
Thank you all.
you.